A number of times over the years, I would get a new piece of backpacking gear and think this should work out just fine, only to decide after using it that it didn't. With new gear, it's easy to imagine we'll be using it in fair weather and pleasant conditions. At least, that's what I've done repeatedly. Sometimes everything will be happy and sunny. When I've gone car camping or on trips of 1 or 2 nights, I picked days when the forecast was good. I once knew a couple that wouldn't camp during a chance of rain for fear their down sleeping bags might get wet. If weather or other conditions get really bad on short trips, we easily might decide to just sleep in the SUV or go home. Things easily could be different if we're backpacking hundreds of miles on a long trail, particularly if we are forced to focus on mileage. Wherever we are at night, we're usually stuck there and have to deal with whatever the conditions are. If we want to get into that kind of hiking for the first time, we can help ourselves by testing our gear in advance, at least at home. That's a safe environment if we make mistakes the first time we use the stuff. Getting hands-on experience with the gear will pay off later. We can use the stuff with some efficiency because we already learned how to do that. We're going to look at this idea in detail, especially regarding the kinds of headaches we can encounter doing big miles on long trails. It can help if we use our imagination. How unpleasant can things get? Potentially, they can get unpleasant. I can provide some examples that might not be immediately obvious. For example, in another video I told how I installed a zipper on a fleece hoodie. The hoodie is black, and I installed a heavy gauge white zipper with an extra large pull tab. This zipper is basically twice as large as what we would see on a similar manufactured garment. So why the heck did I think this was necessary? The answer is because I've broken a small zipper on a jacket in the middle of nowhere. And I've struggled to get a jacket zipped up in the dark with cold fingers. To make sure that doesn't happen again, I even widen the zipper opening so it will work fast with no snagging. It's easier to see in the dark because it's white. Tents can be particularly vexing for beginners. I was about 11 years old when I first pitched a tent, and it sagged just about as bad as the one we see here. What we see here has potential problems. A sagging tent will flap around and make a lot of noise in a strong wind. A tight pitch is less likely to do that. A tight pitch of this tent will give us more room. Some tents have what's called bathtub floors that might collect water if the tent sags. With tents like this, securely anchoring the tent pegs is mandatory for a tight pitch. Any guy lines have to be at least moderately tight. If tent corners are pegged down, they have to be pulled tight. What if the ground is filled with rocks? What if the soil is so loose the tent pegs move around too easily? I usually have decent luck with the pegs on the left. Sometimes I have to find a big rock to hammer them in. I always carry a few pegs like the ones on the right because they hold up fairly well if I beat the daylights out of them to get them into the ground, or if the soil is loose. If I go out into the snow and ice in the winter, I'll carry this mallet to get the pegs in. Rocks that could do that job are usually frozen to the ground in winter. A lot of beginners will choose a freestanding tent, and I don't blame them. We might have to use pegs to hold down a freestanding tent's rainfly, but those tents usually don't sag. If we pitch our tent at home after we buy it, we'll have an idea how much time it takes to put the thing up and take it down, and how much ground space the tent needs. It can help to know these details in advance before we go out on a long trail. Let's use that imagination again. What if it rains all night and our freestanding nylon tent is really wet? Then it will be heavier. This tent also will get heavier when it's wet, but without the stakes and the blue tarp, it only weighs 20 ounces to begin with. Another issue is putting a really big tarp under the tent like we see here. At first, this seems like a great idea. We won't get dirt anywhere near us. We can have a problem if water collects on the tarp that protrudes from the edges of the tent walls. There are many places in the American West where it rarely rains. This tarp idea would work fine in those areas. But if we do this during a heavy overnight rain in the eastern United States, odds are quite good we will end up wet inside the tent. Water will collect on the exposed tarp from running off the tent walls if nothing else, and usually there won't be anything to prevent that water from running inside the tent. With the freestanding tent, the water can run under the tent floor. which will get us wet unless the tent floor is 100% waterproof. This kind of trouble could be prevented if we can somehow manage to pitch the tent on a place that's slightly higher than the immediately surrounding area. One fast answer to deal with this issue is just grab a pair of scissors so the tarp doesn't stick out anywhere from under the tent walls. Those who have not yet slept outdoors usually are a little concerned about it. Most first-timers will choose an inflatable sleeping pad. If the manufacturer recommends or sells a patching kit, I would take that as a clue I need to buy the kit. I also suggest we test our sleeping rig at home. We can pitch the tent in the yard and spend the night in it. It can be discouraging if it rains all night, but it also can be educational. Another test would be to just lay our sleeping equipment out on the floor and spend a night sleeping on it indoors. I've never used a hammock, but if I ever buy one, I definitely will try it out close to home before a long trip. If we want to cook meals on the trail, and we haven't done that kind of thing before, it is helpful to test our cooking gear in the backyard, cooking the same kind of stuff we plan to eat while hiking. It's very helpful to know in advance how long it takes to cook the stuff, how long it takes to clean everything up, and how much water different menu items might require. If we repeatedly burn food at the bottom of our cook pot, we wouldn't be the first people to do it. I used to do it all the time. Then I learned the value of cooking with lower water temperatures, reducing the heat coming off the stove, and that prevented burned food in the pot. It also helped to conserve stove fuel. I talked about this at length in another video. The link is in the description. A number of long-distance hikers on YouTube will tell us they choose not to cook meals on a long trail. If we want to try that, it might help to go a few days eating only what we would eat when on the trail. If we find our taste change on the trail, we shouldn't be too surprised. For example, I have absolutely no problem at all eating chocolate at home. During my section hikes, however, I lost my appetite for it and I could barely stand to look at the stuff. If it needs to be said directly, testing gear at home is one way to ensure we are satisfied with the choices we made. We need to know we can handle whatever inconvenience might be involved. I bought this small pot because I thought it was really cool. I still think it's cool, but it's too small to be practical for anything except coffee or tea. When I bought this MSR Whisperlight International, I was infatuated with the idea it could burn gasoline and kerosene in addition to white gas, which is the same thing as Coleman fuel. This stove does what it's supposed to do. If I had to melt snow for water in something like an alpine environment, this would be my first choice. And my choice of fuel would be white gas. This stove has to be preheated. I discovered that if I used gasoline, the fumes nearly made me sick, and the gas would almost explode when lit in the priming pan. Kerosene, on the other hand, would cover everything with soot during the preheating. It's true I could carry a different fuel for preheating. It's also true I could use a stove that doesn't require that kind of preheating in the first place. Under ordinary circumstances, I have found a canister stove much lighter and easier to deal with. Alcohol stoves are fun and popular, but if we overfill one, whatever the stove is sitting on is likely to catch fire too when we light it. If we think we will love a camp stove, I highly recommend trying it out in our backyard to make sure we really will. For most of us, a canister stove will do the job just fine. I have bought other gear I've never used more than once or twice. I have no surefire advice to offer on how to prevent this. The downside, of course, is I spent money on the stuff I'm not using. I have learned to avoid high-priced items for this reason. If some piece of gear is going to disappoint us, it's better if it happens close to home. Some folks on the Appalachian Trail have bought replacement gear in the middle of their hike when they decided they needed to do that. Another thing we cannot guarantee is that some piece of gear won't break, rip apart, or fail to work. I have minimized that kind of thing, I think, by being at least a little careful with my stuff and using gear that's structurally simple. Some packs have weight limits. For example, some are not supposed to carry more than 30 pounds, and it's a good idea to respect those limits. I also carry a big sewing needle, dental floss, some kind of cordage, and duct tape. I would try to make at least temporary repairs if something got damaged. And now we're done. Thanks to my subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider it, and thanks for watching.